The night the power went out. It was a chilly night in early March a couple of years ago. I had just gotten home from work, exhausted after a long day. All I wanted was to crack open a cold beer, put my feet up, and relax. I sat on the couch, eyes closed, trying to ignore the stress of life. After flipping through the TV channels and finding nothing worth watching, I gave up and decided to enjoy the silence. But peace and quiet were too much to ask for. Not 10 seconds later, all the lights in the house shut off at once. That familiar fuzzy popping sound echoed through the house, and I groaned in frustration. Our house had a tendency to lose power, but it always seemed to happen at the worst times. I stepped outside to see if the neighbors' lights were out too, hoping it was just a minor outage. As I stood on the porch, I noticed at least one house on the block still had power. That meant the problem was with our house. I turned to go back inside, but when I tried the front door, it was locked. I froze, confused. I tried the handle a few more times, but it wouldn't budge. I banged on the door and called my wife's name, thinking maybe she had woken up and locked it without realizing. There was no answer. Panic set in. I ran around to the back door, but it was locked too. My wife usually left doors unlocked, so this was unusual. As I rounded the side of the house to check the breaker box, I froze. My garden hose, which I knew had been neatly coiled, was lying in the grass below the breaker box. Someone had cut the power intentionally. I sprinted to the nearest window and peered inside. In the darkness, I saw two flashlights swinging wildly, as if someone was rummaging through our house. They were stealing our things. I was furious. How dare someone break into my house while I was home? I reached for my phone to call the police, only to realize I had left it on the couch. I started to run to my neighbor's house to borrow a phone, but then it hit me. My wife was still inside, asleep and vulnerable. I couldn't leave her there. I grabbed some loose rocks from the yard and started throwing them at our bedroom window, hoping to wake her up. After the third rock, she opened the window. I quickly explained the situation and told her to hide in the closet. She didn't ask questions, she just disappeared. I sprinted to my neighbor's house and banged on the door. I explained what was happening as quickly as possible and used his phone to call the police. I waited on his porch, praying my wife would be okay. When the police arrived, I ran out to meet them and explained the situation. They barged into the house, but the intruders were gone. The back door was wide open, and many of our valuables had been stolen. My wife was shaken. She told me that seconds after hiding, she heard someone kick open the bedroom door. The intruder stood there, cocking a gun, and listened for movement. She said it was the most terrifying moment of her life. I'll never forgive myself for leaving her in the house with potential murderers. We still live in that house, and I often think about what could have happened if I hadn't stepped outside that night. The basement intruder. I've always lived in the shadow of my older brother. He's successful, and I've been trying to replicate that for years. Recently, I moved back in with my parents to get back on my feet. I stayed in the basement, which was like a mini apartment with its own kitchen, bathroom, and TV. It wasn't bad, and it kept me from feeling like a burden. One night, a nasty storm was raging outside. Rain hammered against the windows, and the wind rattled the house. My parents were out of town, so I had the place to myself. I was about to fall asleep when the power went out. Everything clicked off, and I was left in total darkness. I groaned, annoyed, but figured I'd deal with it in the morning. As I lay there, I heard a loud thud against one of the basement windows. It sounded like something heavy had hit it. Reluctantly, I got up and grabbed my phone, using the flashlight to investigate. When I reached the window, I nearly dropped my phone. A man's face was pressed against the glass, staring right at me. His eyes were wide, his skin pale and drenched. As soon as he saw me, he moved away. I stumbled back, my heart racing. Before I could process what I'd seen, I heard footsteps above me. The floorboards creaked as someone moved through the house. I was home alone, and my house was being broken into. One of the intruders knew I was in the basement. I checked my phone, but the power outage had knocked out the Wi-Fi, and I had no cell service in the basement. I was trapped. I decided to sneak upstairs and try to get out the front door to call the police. As I reached the top of the stairs, I saw 3 figures with flashlights moving through the house. One of them was carrying a gun. I froze, petrified. Then I heard one of them say, "Alex is in the basement. Go find him." How did they know my name? I backed down the stairs, my heart pounding. I had to get out. I grabbed a stool, climbed up to a basement window, and smashed the glass with my elbow. I scrambled through the broken window, cutting myself on the shards, and ran through the rain to a safe distance. I called the police, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. By the time they arrived, the intruders were gone. So much had been stolen. My parents were livid, and I had to beg them not to kick me out. I still don't know who those people were or how they knew my name. I hate thinking about what might have happened if they had found me. The warehouse encounter. I work a night shift security job at a warehouse a few towns over. The building is isolated, with rows of tall metal shelves and loading docks. The work is usually quiet, and I enjoy the solitude. But one Thursday night, everything changed. A storm was raging outside, and the power in the warehouse flickered a few times before going out completely. I was the only employee there, so it was up to me to restore the power. I grabbed my flashlight and started unplugging the massive machines before checking the breakers. As I patrolled the aisles, I heard a loud metallic clattering. I brushed it off as the storm, but then I saw a faint beam of light moving along the shelves ahead of me. It looked just like my flashlight. I froze, knowing no one else should be there. When I reached the spot, the light was gone. I continued my patrol, but then I noticed a strange smell, musty and metallic, like rusted metal or stagnant water. I followed the smell to one of the loading bays and saw 2 sets of wet footprints leading into a storage aisle. My heart raced as I heard faint whispers ahead. I clicked off my flashlight and crept closer, gripping my taser. When I turned the corner, there was no one there. The whispering had stopped. I was rattled but decided to focus on restoring the power. As I fumbled with the breakers, I heard something scrape across the floor. I swung my flashlight around and saw a crowbar lying a few feet away. It hadn't been there before. I yelled out that I was armed, bluffing with my taser. As I headed for the door, a loud crash echoed through the building, followed by rushing footsteps. I turned the corner and saw 2 figures dressed in black. One of them was holding a crowbar. They looked at me for a split second, then started sprinting toward me. I didn't think, I just ran. I weaved through the aisles, praying I could navigate the warehouse better than they could. Eventually, the footsteps faded, and I made it to the exit. I called the police, and they arrived quickly, but the intruders were gone. My boss wasn't sympathetic and almost fired me for running. I still work nights at that warehouse, but now there are at least 2 people on every shift. I don't know what those intruders wanted, but I'm glad they didn't catch me.